The approach I took for my bulletin board was focusing on an eye-catching, colorful design. I wanted to make it colorful to entice students to walk into the classroom, see the board, and focus on the serious topic. The introduction of the board would begin with a read aloud written by Ellen Javernick that would be discussed when we introduce the expectations and consequences. I chose to read the book What If Everybody Did That to get students thinking about the consequences when multiple people choose to not follow expectations set for them. This book outlines scenarios that support students thinking around breaking expectations and the warranted consequences in a fun and serious manner. After the read aloud, all students will receive a blank contract that they can fill out with their learning and classroom expectations as well as consequences. So in this example here, it has the goals, but instead we would have classroom expectations, then the consequences, but you have your punch cards, and then when the contract will be reviewed, and then they would have to sign it. This ensures the students will always know the expectations are, and they won't be surprised if they choose not to follow them and one of the consequences is used. So for my classroom expectations, I chose to go with 5. We have respect, listen, patience, try your best, and have fun. These expectations support both learning and classroom expectations because the students must be supportive of their learning and their peers to ensure a welcoming, positive learning environment. Patience also is key in students working on being patient in groups, but also individually. If a student is challenged, becomes frustrated, and has the reaction to act out, it affects both their learning and the classroom atmosphere. And then finally, I included the last 2 expectations into the learning and classroom expectations because students can get caught up in succeeding, but by ensuring the students recognize the importance of putting in the effort all the time and enjoying their learning, then the achievements will follow. As for the classroom consequences, I decided to go with an approach that stems from the read aloud as well, with the if-then scenarios. I chose this approach as several teachers in blogs and on Pinterest and those I've talked to emphasize the benefit of this approach for promoting positive classroom behaviors. The first consequence, if I don't follow the classroom expectations, then I will get a stop sign warning. A stop sign warning reflects the learning in class as I can simply slide the laminated stop sign onto the student's desk without interrupting the instruction or centering a student out. It will say, please stop what you're doing and make a better choice. It is a clear acknowledgement that the behavior needs to change without having to interrupt. The second consequence here is, if I break the classroom expectations again, then I will have a 30-second teacher conference. This second consequence is slightly more serious in that if the behavior continues, the student and I will have to discuss what they were doing, what caused them to engage in this behavior, and how we can change it or what they might need to improve the behavior. This puts onus on both myself and the student in working together to create a more positive behavior. The third consequence is, if I continue to not follow the classroom expectations, then I will complete a behavior think sheet for myself, my teacher, my parent/caregiver to sign. So a couple behavior think sheets here go over what they chose to do, why they made the choice, who it affected, and 2 things that they could have done instead, or how they could change their behavior. And it's something that makes them think about what they did and why they engaged with it, and maybe that it could have been avoided. Again, this is a private consequence that does not involve other students or interrupts the learning. Finally, I chose to conclude the consequences with a positive consequence to recognize the students who are following the expectations set out for them. So here we have, if I follow the classroom expectations, I get a behavior punch card. So a behavior punch card would just be a colorful card that every student would get and have the opportunity to receive punches for. And these cards will be used for the students to hold on to throughout a specific amount of time that's set out for them. And then they might receive rewards, they might just get the whole punches, but it is just being able to recognize that the students are behaving with the expectations, exemplifying them, and showing that they can work well. This reflects learning from the course as I am showing that I recognize the accomplishments, support their behavior, and care for the students. So that is my overall board. As for the teacher introduction, I chose to not include that on the actual bulletin board because if it was in my classroom, I think I'd prefer having it in a separate area for introductions. So I decided to go with developing a name mind map on a piece of chart paper that would be hung up in the introduction area. Using this approach, I would then have each student complete their own name mind maps in the first week or two of school, in which we would then hang up in the hallway bulletin board for our classmates and our peers to get to know all of us better and be more inclusive. I wanted to keep the expectations and consequences separate from an introduction to who I am, to keep the emphasis on the importance of following the expectations and not lose any of the focus. Overall, the expectations and consequences I determined for my board emphasize consistency. They are age-appropriate and easily understood concepts as discussed in prior week's classes. As a teacher candidate, I am confident in the expectations outlined and keeping my classroom well managed.